The billionaire widower's twins never smiled until the nanny did something unexpected. Emily Johnson watched with a heavy heart as the two boys sat on the luxurious living room leather couch, their small hands clutching tablets, eyes glued to the screens without a trace of emotion. Richard Williams, the businessman who had hired her, explained in a weary voice that the twins hadn't smiled even once since losing their mother 2 years ago. That's when Mrs. Jenkins, the housekeeper who had worked at the mansion for over 15 years, approached Emily and whispered in her ear, "Sweetheart, you're the 13th nanny this man has hired. Every single one left here in tears, unable to get so much as a peep out of these boys." Emily swallowed hard. At 28, she had dealt with difficult children before, but never two who seemed to have lost the will to live. Ethan and Noah, the 7-year-old twins, remained motionless like wax statues. "Do they not speak?" Emily asked Mr. Richard. "They talk to each other, but only through notes, never out loud," he replied, running a hand through his graying hair. "The doctors say there's nothing physically wrong. It's emotional trauma." Emily slowly approached the boys, pulling a colorful duck puppet from her bag, a gift from her grandmother when she was a child, one she always carried with her. "Hi, Ethan. Hi, Noah. I'm Emily, and this is Ducky," she said, moving the puppet. The twins didn't even glance up from their tablets. They kept tapping the screens mechanically, showing no interest in the games they seemed to be playing. Richard shook his head, discouraged. "See, childish methods don't work. I've hired the best child psychologists in New York, bought every toy you can imagine. Nothing." He gestured toward a nearby room. "Want to see?" Emily followed Richard into a room filled with expensive toys, video games, remote control cars, action figures, musical instruments, educational games. Everything was perfectly organized and seemingly untouched. They don't even look at these things. They spend all day glued to those tablets, eat without showing pleasure or disgust, barely sleep. Richard sighed deeply. "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and find them by their bedroom window, staring at the garden." Emily returned to the living room where the boys remained in the same spot, unmoving. She sat on the floor in front of them and simply stayed there, watching. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now back to the story. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, ever so slightly, Ethan lifted his eyes from the tablet and looked at Emily. When he realized she had noticed, he quickly looked back down. Noah did the same a few seconds later. It was the first sign they still had curiosity about something. Emily decided not to push. She simply stayed there, silent, sometimes playing with the puppet, sometimes just gazing out the window at the garden. At dinner, Mrs. Jenkins called everyone to the table. The twins marched like little soldiers, sat in their chairs, and began eating mechanically. Chew, swallow, no pleasure, no disgust, no expression. "It's always like this," Mrs. Jenkins murmured to Emily. "They eat because they have to eat, sleep because they have to sleep. They don't live, they just exist." After dinner, Richard showed Emily the room where she'd be staying. The Beverly Hills mansion was enormous, with immaculate gardens and a breathtaking view of the city. "Emily, I know it seems impossible, but I need my children back," said Richard, his voice choked. "They're all I have left of Jennifer." "Tell me about her," Emily requested. Richard hesitated for a moment, as if speaking about his wife was too painful. "Jennifer was a pediatrician. She always dreamed of having children. When we found out we were having twins, she was overjoyed. She said our family would be perfect." He paused, taking a deep breath. "She loved playing with the kids, making up little stories, singing silly songs. The house was always full of laughter. And now it's as if the joy was sucked out of this house along with her." That first night, Emily barely slept. Around 2 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the hallway. She got up quietly and peeked through the door crack. Ethan and Noah were walking toward their room, coming from the living room. The next day, she decided to investigate further. While the boys ate breakfast in silence, Emily went to their room. It was a large space with 2 beds, a desk, shelves full of books, and neatly arranged toys. Something under one of the beds caught her attention. She bent down and found several hidden drawings. All of them depicted the same scene: a brown-haired woman in a blue dress standing in a garden full of flowers. The woman was always smiling, with two little boys holding her hands. "Find something interesting?" Emily startled at the voice behind her. It was Richard standing in the doorway. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gone through their things, but..." Richard approached and saw the drawings in Emily's hands. His face immediately paled. "That's the dress she wore on the last day," he murmured. "We were in my mother's garden. It was Jennifer's birthday. She looked beautiful in that blue dress. Was that the day before the accident?" Richard only nodded, his eyes glistening. Emily began observing the twins more closely. She noticed they always exchanged small notes during the day, as if they had a secret language between them. She also realized that every time someone approached the closet in their room, they grew visibly agitated. On the third day, Emily's curiosity outweighed her respect for privacy. When the boys went to the living room to watch their tablets, she carefully opened the closet. At the back, behind the clothes, was a small old safe. As she reached for it, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Ethan and Noah stood frozen in the doorway, staring at her with the first signs of emotion she'd seen since arriving: anger. "Don't touch that!" Ethan shouted, breaking his 2-year silence. Noah looked just as shocked as Emily at the sound of his brother's voice. The three stood in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. The shout brought Richard running upstairs. "What happened? Ethan spoke?" he asked breathlessly. Ethan immediately retreated back into silence, but his eyes remained fixed on Emily, filled with a mix of anger and fear. Just then, a sharp voice echoed through the mansion. "Richard, where are you?" "My mother," Richard muttered, his face tightening. Mrs. Eleanor Williams entered the house like a hurricane. At 70, she was a formidable woman, always impeccably dressed, her silver hair pulled into a perfect bun. "Who is this girl?" she asked, eyeing Emily up and down. "Mother, this is Emily, the boy's new nanny." "The 13th, from what I've heard," Mrs. Eleanor said, crossing her arms. "Richard, you need to stop this fantasy that these young women will fix your children's problems. What they need is discipline, not coddling." Emily felt her blood boil but kept her composure. "Excuse me, Mrs. Eleanor. I believe what these children need is someone who understands their pain." "Pain?" Mrs. Eleanor let out a bitter laugh. "Sweetheart, do you think you're the first person to try cheap psychology on them? What they need is to forget this whole thing and move on." "You don't forget a mother, Mrs. Eleanor, especially when she was taken from them so soon." The discussion grew more heated. Mrs. Eleanor insisted the boys needed strict rules, schedules for everything, military discipline. Emily argued they needed time to process their loss, affection, someone who would listen without judgment. Throughout the argument, Ethan and Noah remained in the corner of the room watching. It was the first time they had shown interest in anything happening around them. "You know what bothers me the most?" Mrs. Eleanor said, pointing at the twins. "You two are exactly like your mother, always too sensitive, always needing special attention." For the first time, Emily saw tears in the boys' eyes. "Mrs. Eleanor, please." Richard tried to intervene. "No, Richard. Someone needs to speak the truth here. Jennifer spoiled these children too much, always making up games, always celebrating every little thing. And now look at the result." "The result is that they know what it's like to be loved," Emily burst out. "And they know what they've lost." The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Eleanor turned red with anger. Richard was visibly uncomfortable, and the twins looked at Emily as if she were the first person in 2 years to understand something important. That night, after Mrs. Eleanor left, grumbling that Richard was raising his children the wrong way, Emily heard footsteps in the hallway again. This time she decided to follow the boys. Ethan and Noah went down to the kitchen and sat at the table. Emily watched from the doorway. They weren't doing anything, just sitting there staring into space. She approached slowly and sat with them. "You miss her most at night, don't you?" she asked softly. The two looked at her but didn't answer. "I lost my grandma when I was 10. She lived with me and was my best friend," Emily continued, speaking gently. "For a long time I'd come to the kitchen in the middle of the night too. It was where she and I used to bake cookies together. Noah tilted his head, showing interest. Mom used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, Ethan murmured, so quietly Emily almost didn't hear. It was the second time he had spoken. What were your mom's pancakes like? Emily asked, careful not to sound too eager and scare the boys. She made them in the shape of hearts, and she sang a silly song while she cooked, Noah said, the first words he'd spoken since Emily arrived. The two brothers looked at each other, as if surprised by their own voices. Do you remember the song? Emily asked. Ethan nodded and began humming very softly. Noah joined in. It was a simple tune, probably made up by their mother. Emily felt a lump in her throat. She was witnessing the first signs of life from these children in 2 years. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the days that followed, Emily established a different routine. Instead of trying to entertain the boys during the day, she respected their silence, but was always available when they showed interest in interacting. She discovered they loved to draw, but they only drew their mother. She also noticed they had a special ritual. Every afternoon at 4 o'clock, they'd go to their bedroom window and stare at the garden for exactly 15 minutes. It was the time Mum used to come home from the hospital, explained Noah one afternoon when Emily asked about the ritual. She'd always wave at us from the car window, Ethan added. Emily felt her heart tighten. The boys had been waiting for their mother to return for 2 years. She decided to talk to Richard about it. She found him in the office, shuffling papers with a weary expression. Mr. Williams, may I speak with you? Of course, Emily. How are things? They're talking to me. Not much, but they are. They told me about Sunday pancakes and the window ritual. Richard's face twisted in pain. The window ritual. I knew they did that, but I couldn't bring myself to talk about it. Why don't you talk about Jennifer with them? Richard stood and walked to the office window, turning his back to Emily. Because it hurts too much. Because every time I think of her, it feels like I'm losing her all over again. His voice was thick. I thought if we didn't talk about her, the pain would fade faster. But it hasn't, has it? No. And judging by how the boys are, I don't think it has for them either. Emily stepped closer. What if we tried a different approach? What if instead of avoiding memories of Jennifer, we celebrated them? Richard turned to her, his eyes red. What do you mean? The boys hold on to their mother's memories like treasures. They draw her, sing the songs she sang, remember little details from special moments. What if that's exactly what they need? Not to forget, but to remember with love instead of pain. Richard was silent for a long time. I don't know if I can. You don't have to do it alone. We can try together. That night, Emily went down to the kitchen again and found the twins in their usual spot. This time, she brought a photo she'd found in the living room. Jennifer with the boys in the garden all smiling. May I sit with you? They both nodded. I brought a photo of your mom. Emily placed it on the table. She was very beautiful. Ethan and Noah looked at the photo with tender expressions. Her hair smelled nice, said Noah. And she gave the tightest hugs, Ethan added. What were her hugs like? She'd squeeze really tight and rock us back and forth, Ethan explained, mimicking the motion. And she'd say we were her greatest treasure in the whole world, Noah said with a faint smile. It was the first smile Emily had seen from either of them. It lasted only seconds, but it was enough to tell her she was on the right path. Would you like to tell me more about her? They exchanged glances and nodded. For the next 2 hours, Ethan and Noah shared stories about their mother, how she did different voices for each book character, how she'd do silly little dances to cheer them up when they were sad, how she'd write sweet notes and tuck them into their lunchboxes. Dad stopped putting notes in our lunches, Ethan said sadly. He stopped doing a lot of things Mom used to do, Noah agreed. Emily realized the boys weren't just grieving their mother, they were also coping with their father's complete change in behavior. The next day she approached Richard again. Mr. Williams, may I suggest something? Of course. The boys miss not just Jennifer, but the traditions you had as a family. Sunday pancakes, lunchbox notes, playtime. What if we brought some of those back? Richard hesitated. Emily, I don't know how to make pancakes. Jennifer was the one who cooked. I can barely fry an egg. Then we can learn together. Mrs. Jenkins can teach us. What if it doesn't work? What if I do something that makes them think of her even more and they get worse? Mr. Richard, with all due respect, they can't get any worse than they already are. They're just surviving, not living. We have to try. Richard thought for a moment. All right, but let's take it slow. The following Sunday, Emily woke up early and went to talk to Mrs. Jenkins. Jenkins, do you know how to make pancakes? Yes, dear. Why? I want to try making the Sunday pancakes Jennifer used to make for the boys. Jenkins stopped what she was doing and looked at Emily with kindness. Dear, you're treading on very delicate ground. Are you sure? I am. They need to know it's possible to remember their mother with joy, not just sadness. Jenkins sighed and nodded. All right, I'll teach you, but the recipe will have to be different. Jennifer had a special touch that only she knew. When Richard came down for breakfast, he found Emily in the kitchen, struggling with pancake batter that kept sticking to the pan. What are you doing? Trying to make pancakes. Not very successfully, I admit. Richard stepped closer and saw the mess Emily had made. For the first time in a long while, he smiled. Jennifer made a mess like this the first time, too. He picked up a spatula. Can I help? Of course. As they tried to salvage the pancake batter, Ethan and Noah came down for breakfast. They stopped at the kitchen door, watching their father and the nanny work together. Do you want to help? Emily asked. The two boys approached timidly. Noah climbed onto a chair and started stirring the batter. Ethan was in charge of adding the ingredients, as Jenkins dictated. The first batch came out completely lopsided and burnt. The second was better, but still far from ideal. On the third try, they finally managed pancakes that looked edible. They're not heart-shaped like Mom's, Ethan observed. No, but they're shaped like... Richard looked at the uneven pancakes. Shaped like clouds? Noah laughed. It was the second time Emily had heard one of the boys laugh. They can be our family's cloud pancakes, she suggested. Cloud pancakes, Ethan repeated, liking the idea. They sat down to eat. The pancakes weren't perfect, but there was something special about that moment. It was the first meal they'd shared together as a family since Emily had arrived. Daddy, Noah said after a while in silence. Yes, son. Do you remember the song Mom used to sing when she made pancakes? Richard swallowed hard. For a few seconds, Emily thought he'd get up and leave the kitchen, as he always did when the boys brought up their mother. Instead, he closed his eyes and began to hum softly. The same melody the boys had sung to Emily a few days earlier. Ethan and Noah joined their father, and the three of them sang together for the first time in 2 years. Emily had to fight back tears right there at the table. It was the most moving moment since she'd arrived at the mansion. After breakfast, something unexpected happened. Ethan went to his room and came back with the small safe they kept in the closet. Emily, do you want to see what's in here? He asked. It was the first time they'd offered to show anyone the contents of the safe. Only if you want to show me. Noah took a small key hidden inside a music box and opened the safe. Inside were several items: a handwritten note, a small perfume bottle, a delicate bracelet, and a notebook. These are Mom's special things, Ethan explained. Noah picked up the notebook and opened it. It was full of handwritten recipes in careful script. Mom wrote recipes for when we grew up, Noah said. Look, he showed a page where it was written. For my Ethan, when you turn 10, recipe for the chocolate cake that will win over all the girls at school. On the next page, for my Noah, when you're sad, recipe for the milk pudding that gives you a hug from the inside. Each recipe had a special dedication, full of advice and declarations of love. Richard stepped closer to see the notebook, and when he recognized his wife's handwriting, he broke down. He began to cry, as he hadn't in 2 years, sobbing loudly, not bothering to hide his pain from his sons. The twins, seeing their father cry, also started to weep. But this time, they weren't silent tears of sadness. They were loud, freeing tears from those who could finally express the pain they carried in their chests. The three hugged right there in the kitchen, crying together for the first time since they lost Jennifer. Emily quietly slipped out of the kitchen to give them privacy, but inside she was radiant. This was the turning point she had been waiting for. When they returned to the living room calmer, Ethan had an idea. "Daddy, can we make one of Mommy's recipes? Which recipe do you want to make?" Noah flipped through the notebook and stopped at a specific page. "This one. For the whole family, when you want to remember what love tastes like, recipe for Grandma Susan's spoon brigadeiro." Richard smiled through his tears. "Grandma Susan was my grandmother. Jennifer loved this recipe." They spent the whole afternoon in the kitchen making spoon brigadeiro. Emily watched from a distance, seeing how the twins gradually came back to life. They asked questions, told stories, laughed at their own mishaps. When Mrs. Eleanor arrived for dinner, she found a scene she hadn't seen in 2 years. Richard and the twins in the kitchen, covered in chocolate, laughing together. "What's going on here?" she asked, clearly uncomfortable with so much joy. "We're making Mommy's recipe," Ethan explained, offering a spoonful of brigadeiro to his grandmother. Mrs. Eleanor looked at the spoon, then at her grandson, then at Richard. "You're stirring up the past again." "No, Mom, we're honoring the past," Richard corrected. "There's a difference." Mrs. Eleanor tasted the brigadeiro, and to everyone's surprise, her eyes filled with tears. "It tastes just like Grandma Susan used to make," she murmured. "Mom learned the recipe from Dad, and Dad learned it from Grandma Susan," Noah explained. "And now we learned it from Mom even though she's not here," Ethan finished. Mrs. Eleanor sank heavily into a kitchen chair. For a moment her tough mask slipped, and she seemed just like a grandmother who missed her too. "I miss her too," she admitted softly. "I just thought if you forgot, it would hurt less." "But we don't want to forget, Grandma," Noah said, moving closer to her. "We want to remember the good things." Ethan came to her other side, and the two hugged their grandmother. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Eleanor said, holding her grandsons. "You're right. She was too special to be forgotten." That night, for the first time in 2 years, the twins slept through the night. They didn't wake up to go to the window, they didn't go down to the kitchen. They slept the peaceful sleep of those no longer carrying their burden alone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, the house underwent a visible transformation. Richard had Jennifer's photos taken out of hiding and placed some around the house. The twins started playing with some of the toys that had been abandoned in the playroom. Emily established new traditions with them. Every Tuesday was a day to cook one of Jennifer's recipes from the notebook. Every Thursday was a day to share stories about her. And every Sunday remained Cloud Pancake Day, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. A few weeks later, when things finally seemed to be settling down, Ethan had a breakdown. They were in the kitchen making Jennifer's carrot cake recipe when Ethan suddenly burst into uncontrollable tears. "I want my real mom," he shouted. "I don't just want her recipes, I want her here, making cake with me." Noah also started crying, swept up in his brother's pain. "Why did she leave? Why did she leave us?" Ethan sobbed. Richard, who was in the living room watching TV, rushed into the kitchen. When he saw his boys in that state, he didn't know what to do. Emily knelt down to their level. "Ethan, Noah, you know your mum didn't want to leave, right?" "But she did," Ethan yelled. "And now she's never coming back." "It's true. She won't come back the way you want her to," Emily said calmly. "But do you know where she is?" The boys stopped crying for a moment, curious about the question. "She's right here," Emily pointed to Ethan's heart. "And here," she pointed to Noah's heart. "And here," she pointed to Richard's heart. "But that's not the same," Noah murmured. "No, it's not. And it's okay for you to be sad because it's not the same. But do you know what she'd say if she were here now?" "What?" Ethan asked between sobs. "She'd say you're the bravest boys in the world, because even with all this pain, you still love her. And that love you feel for her is the part of her that never leaves." Richard stepped closer and hugged both boys. "Emily's right. The love we feel for Mom is forever. And every time we make one of her recipes, or sing a song she used to sing, or laugh remembering a game she played, she becomes a little more alive. The crisis passed, but it helped everyone understand that healing wouldn't be linear. There would be good days and bad days, days of joy and days of deep longing. Emily began teaching the boys how to handle these emotional ups and downs. She created a memory box with them, a container with photos of Jennifer, her perfume, some special recipes, and a playlist of her favorite songs. When the longing gets too strong, you can take this box and spend time with memories of Mom, she explained. It's okay to be sad. What matters is not being sad alone. Richard fully supported the idea and made his own memory box too. But the biggest transformation happened a few weeks later, during a heavy storm that knocked out the power in the house. They were all in the living room, lit only by candles, when Emily had an idea. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and started making shadows on the wall. "Look, a rabbit," she said, moving her hands to form the shadow of a rabbit on the wall. Noah laughed and tried to make a shadow too, but couldn't manage anything recognizable. "Let me try," Ethan said excitedly. Emily taught them how to make different shadows: a dog, a butterfly, a bird. They were all laughing and having fun when Richard had a flashback. "Jennifer used to do this with you," he said with a nostalgic smile. "I remember one time when the power went out, and she spent the whole night making shadows on the wall so you wouldn't be scared." "That's right," Noah exclaimed, "and she made up a story about a shadow kingdom." "Do you remember the story?" Emily asked. "Sort of," Ethan said. "It was about a boy who lived in the shadow kingdom and could only leave if someone in the real world believed in him. And in the end, 2 kids believed in him, and he became real," Noah finished. "How about we recreate that story?" Richard suggested. They spent the rest of the night crafting the tale of the Shadow Kingdom, each adding their own piece to the story. It was the first time since losing Jennifer that they had created something new together, as a family. When the power came back on, they didn't even notice. They were so caught up in the fun that they kept making shadows for another hour. That night, when Emily went to put the boys to bed, Ethan asked a question that took her by surprise. "Emily, are you going to leave when we're okay?" "Why do you think I'd leave?" "Because all the other nannies left," Noah explained. "And Dad always says you're here to help us get better." Emily sat on the bed between them. "Listen, it's true I came here to help you, but you know what happened? You helped me too." "How?" Ethan asked. "You taught me that sometimes the most important thing we can do for someone is just to be there, even when we don't know what to say." "Like you did for us," Noah observed. "Exactly, and you know what else? You showed me that love is stronger than sadness, that it's possible to carry both in your heart at the same time." "So you're not leaving?" Ethan pressed. "I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know that as long as you want me here, I'll stay." The two smiled, reassured. Months passed. The house had completely transformed. There was frequent laughter, lively conversations at mealtimes, and playtime in the garden. The twins returned to school regularly and even made new friends. But Emily knew the real test of their healing would be when they could talk about their mother with others, not just within the family. The opportunity came when their teacher assigned a project on family traditions. Ethan and Noah came home excited to share the news. "Emily, we want to talk about Mom's recipes for the project," Ethan said. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You'll have to present in front of the whole class." "We're sure," Noah confirmed. "We want everyone to know our mom made the best recipes in the world." Richard was moved when he heard about the project. He decided to help the boys prepare a special presentation. They made posters with photos of Jennifer in the kitchen, brought her recipe notebook, and even prepared spoonfuls of brigadeiro to share with the class. On presentation day, Emily went to school with Richard to watch. Ethan and Noah stood in front of the class and began. "Our family has a very special tradition," Ethan started. "Our mom, Jennifer, left us a notebook of special recipes." "Each recipe has a different dedication," Noah continued. "Some are for when we're sad, others for when we're happy, and some for when we want to make new friends." They showed pages from the notebook and shared stories about cooking with their mom. "Our mom isn't with us anymore," Ethan said, his voice slightly shaky but firm, But every time we make one of her recipes, it's like she's in the kitchen with us. And she always said food made with love tastes different, Noah added. That's why we brought Brigadeiro for you to try. The class was deeply moved. Several children asked questions about Jennifer and the recipes. One girl said she had also lost her grandmother and wanted to make a recipe book for her too. As they left school, Richard hugged his sons. "You were amazing. Mom would be so proud." "We were a little nervous," Ethan admitted. "But it felt good to talk about her with our friends," Noah said. Emily smiled, knowing this had been a turning point. The boys hadn't just moved past their grief. They had learned to turn it into something beautiful. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Richard received a call from a foundation that worked with orphaned children. "Mr. Williams, we heard about your children's school project through the principal. We'd like to know if you'd be interested in sharing your family's experience with other children who've gone through similar losses." Richard talked to Emily and the twins about the proposal. "Would you like to help other kids who've lost their parents?" he asked. "How can we help?" Ethan wanted to know. "By teaching them how to make Mom's recipes and telling them how we learned to be sad and happy at the same time," Noah suggested. And that's how the Jennifer Project was born, an initiative to help grieving children process loss through cooking activities and sharing memories. Once a month, the Williams Mansion turned into an activity center. Children of different ages came with their guardians to participate in cooking workshops, discussion circles, and playful activities. Ethan and Noah became junior mentors, teaching other kids how to make spoon brigadeiros and sharing their own experiences. "At first, we couldn't even talk about our mom," Ethan told a 6-year-old girl who had lost her father. "But then we realized that talking about the people we love doesn't make them farther away. It brings them closer." Mrs. Eleanor Williams, who had initially resisted the project, ended up becoming one of its main supporters. She brought old family recipes and stories about Richard and Jennifer's childhood. "You know, Emily," she said one day as they watched the children playing in the garden, "you taught me that sometimes the best way to protect the ones we love isn't by shielding them from pain, but by teaching them to carry pain alongside love." Emily smiled, seeing how the whole family had transformed. The project grew quickly. Soon they had a team of volunteer psychologists, nutritionists, and other professionals helping the families. But the most touching moment came a year after the project began, when an 8-year-old girl who had attended the first workshops returned with her grandmother. "I want to teach my special recipe to other kids," she said. "It's the corn cake my mom used to make for me." At that moment, Emily realized the circle was complete. The children who had been helped now wanted to help others. On a Sunday afternoon, 2 years after her arrival at the mansion, Emily was in the garden watching Ethan and Noah play with some of the project's children. They were laughing, running, completely lost in the joy of the moment. Richard walked over and sat beside her. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For not giving up on us, for teaching us that we didn't have to choose between remembering and living, that we could do both. You've taught me just as much as I've taught you." "How so?" "You showed me that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply be present, not trying to fix, not trying to explain, just being." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the children play. "Emily," Richard said after a while. "Yes?" "Would you like to stay forever? Not as a nanny, but as family?" Emily looked at him, surprised. "As family? Ethan and Noah already consider you family. Mrs. Jenkins adores you, and I..." He hesitated for a moment. "So I can't imagine our life without you anymore." Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. "Are you sure I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to replace Jennifer?" "Emily, you never tried to replace anyone. You helped us remember who we were before the pain. And you taught us that it's possible to build new things without erasing the past." At that moment, Ethan and Noah came running toward them. "Emily! Emily!" shouted Ethan. "The lady from the foundation wants to talk to you about something really important." "What is it about?" she asked, discreetly wiping away her tears. "She wants you to be the official coordinator of the Jennifer Project," Noah explained excitedly. "She said you're the most qualified person to take care of sad children." Emily looked at Richard, who was smiling. "Seems like the universe is conspiring to keep you here after all," he said. "So, are you going to accept?" Ethan asked eagerly. "There'll be lots of kids to take care of," Noah pointed out, "but you're the best child caregiver in the world." Emily looked at the three faces waiting for her answer. Richard, who had learned to love again, Ethan and Noah, who had regained the ability to smile without guilt. "I accept," she said. "I accept staying. I accept the job. I accept being part of this family." The twins cheered and threw themselves into her arms. Richard joined the hug, and for a moment, Emily felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. 3 years passed. The Jennifer Project had become a national model for supporting grieving children. The Williams mansion now had an entire wing dedicated to the project's activities, but it remained a home full of love and laughter. Ethan and Noah, now 10 years old, had become little experts in helping other children. They developed games, created educational booklets, and even recorded videos explaining how to cope with missing someone. Emily married Richard in a simple ceremony in the garden of the house, where Jennifer used to play with the boys. The twins were the ring bearers and made sure to include a tribute to their mother during the ceremony. "Mom always said love multiplies, it doesn't divide," Ethan said in his speech. "Now we understand what she meant. The love we feel for her didn't shrink, because we also love Emily now. It actually grew. And we know Mom would be happy knowing Emily is taking care of us," Noah added. Mrs. Eleanor Williams, who had become a much more affectionate and present grandmother, cried throughout the ceremony. At the end of that special night, when everyone had left and the house was quiet, Emily found Ethan and Noah in the kitchen. They were sitting at the table with Jennifer's recipe book open in front of them. "What are you two doing?" "We're writing a new recipe," Ethan explained. "New?" "The recipe for our family's happiness," Noah said. "We want to write it down for when other kids need it." Emily leaned in to see what they had written. "Recipe for happiness for families who've lost someone special." Ingredients: a full cup of longing. Don't try to remove it. It belongs. 2 tablespoons of tears. They can be sad or happy. Lots of love. The more, the better. A pinch of courage to talk about the one who's gone. Stories to share. Laughter, even if it's hard at first. Tight hugs. Time. Plenty of time because there's no rush. Instructions: mix all ingredients gently. Don't be afraid to cry while stirring. Let time do its work. Share with people who love you. Serve whenever your heart feels heavy. Important note: this recipe doesn't make the longing go away, but it teaches it to live side by side with joy in the same heart. With love, Ethan and Noah Williams, and our mom Jennifer, who's always with us. Emily had to sit down, overwhelmed by the emotion of reading those words. "You two are amazing," she said, hugging them both. "Your mom would be so proud." "We know," Ethan said with a peaceful smile. "We feel it here." He placed his hand over his heart. "And you, Emily?" Noah asked. "Are you happy here with us?" Emily looked around the kitchen where so many transformations had taken place, where they had cried together, laughed together, and learned together that love is greater than loss. "I'm happier than I ever imagined I could be," she answered sincerely. "Then our recipe worked," said Ethan, pleased. "It worked perfectly," Emily agreed. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily reflected on the entire journey. She had arrived at the mansion thinking her mission would be to make 2 children smile again. She discovered that, in truth, her mission had been much greater, to help an entire family learn that it's possible to carry both pain and joy in the same heart, that love doesn't diminish when shared, and that the people we love never truly leave us when we cherish their memories. The billionaire widowers twins didn't just smile again, they learned to teach other children to smile too. And Emily learned that sometimes, when we think we're saving someone, we're actually the ones being saved. The colorful puppet she had brought on her first attempt to win the boys' attention remained stored in the playroom, not because it had been forgotten, but because it had become unnecessary. After all, real life had become more interesting and vibrant than any game. 5 years later, Ethan and Noah wrote a children's book about the Jennifer Project. The book became a national success, and all the proceeds went toward expanding the project to other cities. In the dedication, they wrote, "To our mother Jennifer, who taught us that love is eternal, to our father Richard, who taught us that it takes courage to love again, to our stepmother Emily, who taught us that family isn't just those you're born with, but those who choose to stay, and to all the children who have lost someone special, you are not alone." The last page of the book featured a photo of the family gathered in the kitchen making spoon brigadeiros. Everyone was smiling, but if you looked closely, you could see a framed picture in the background of a woman in a blue dress smiling too. Because in the Williams family, Jennifer never stopped being part of the special moments. She simply learned to be present in a different way through the love she had planted in her children's hearts, love that continued to grow every day. The end of the story. So, what did you think of this story of resilience and love? Share in the comments which part moved you the most, and if you've ever experienced something similar in your own family. Do you think Emily made the right decisions with the twins? We love reading your honest opinions. Thank you so much for following along. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.